I guess this is the story that started a global movement. This is my story, where it all began. Buckle in for a bumpy ride. I grew up in West Croydon, South London. And if you were to ask me, I would probably say that I was a Christian, but I never really attended church regularly. I wasn't a practicing Christian. Growing up, I never had my dad in the picture. He left when I was around 3 and went back to Jamaica. And home was difficult. Spent a lot of time with my grandma, who is, she was just the light of the family. She was the light of my life. And she provided a lot of normacy, a lot of structure that I suppose I really craved growing up. I craved structure. I wanted a bedtime. I wanted routine. And for a lot of reasons, I just didn't have that. So education was always something that was lacking, I think, for numerous reasons. And I will be going into further detail into my upbringing in my upcoming memoirs, which is called Marked Absent. And in that book, it's going to talk about my complex relationship with education and how being involved in a religious cult kind of played into that and kind of set me up to fail in a lot of ways and made me extremely vulnerable to these kind of groups. I was 13 years old in West Croydon. It was a Sunday, and I was on my way into the town centre when a young person reached out and said, "Hey, we're having this youth group going on. We're going to be doing singing, we're going to be doing acting. It's going to be really fun. Calm, you're not doing anything anyway." So, because I never really had anything planned, I was like, okay, cool. It was local, it was literally like around the corner from my house. So, I went up with her, and the church that I now know as a cult is called the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God. It's a global mega church led by a billionaire bishop, Eddie Macedo. And he's one of the most wealthiest kind of businessmen in the Latin world. He is powerful. He owns like the equivalent of like ITV. Just owns a whole bunch. Okay. I'll do a separate video on him. But basically, he is the wealthiest religious leader in the world. We're not talking millions, we're talking billions. And he has a number of branches around the world. I mean, lots of branches around the world. It's hard to think of a place where there isn't a UCKG. And here in the UK, they have now close to 40 branches, and they often, set up shop in deprived areas, areas that have a high black and brown population. They are right in the heart of West Croydon. And I didn't know it was a church growing up. In Croydon, it's a really dank doorway. They have the classic love heart and dove, that's their logo. But I didn't know it was a church. So I remember being extremely like blown away at the fact that, yo, this is a church. Like when I went upstairs, you have to walk through a doorway, walk upstairs. There's the toilet, there's another room, and then there is the auditorium. And I was like, this is a church. I remember just being amazed. And then, sure enough, it was a youth group. It had people singing, dancing. It was very lively. Okay, very, very lively. So after the youth group now, I was, sat down by a young person, how was it? How did you like it? And it was very lively. And I wasn't part of any kind of like activities outside of school. So immediately it definitely got my attention. Youth groups, which was on a Thursday back then. Now it's on a Wednesday, but back then it was on a Thursday and the Sunday, of course. So they were like, yo, we're having a youth meeting on Thursday. You should come. It's at 6. And I was like, okay, cool. And I can't remember if I went back that same Thursday, but within the next few weeks, I definitely did. And I was going more and more. I went on Thursdays where they had a more serious youth group where, there were prayers and whatnot. Then Sundays were the more livelier ones, singing, dancing, acting. Then it was like, you should come Fridays to fight against the devil. And that was where, looking back, that's where the harm really started. In the UCKG, they have this thing called strong prayers or prayers of deliverance, and it happens 4 times a day, every single Friday, no matter what UCKG you're dealing with. And in those Friday services, they basically perform mass exorcisms. Yeah. And I was 13 when I first experienced it. And back then, I had nothing, like no prior knowledge, no prior experience of that. And it was really, really, it was violent. Looking back, it was like there's pastors and assistant pastors who basically go around and lay hands on your head, and they command demons to come out of you and show themselves. Looking back, it was just so inappropriate that 13-year-old me was put in that situation. I mean, even if they did ask for consent, I couldn't have gave it, because a minor cannot give true consent. A minor could not consent. How do you consent to your abuse? I was a kid. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. They just kind of came and laid hands and said, "Oh, the demon that's causing this." And then the interesting thing about it was, before that, before you kind of get like fully involved in all of that, they sit you down and perform like one-to-ones, in which they say, "Hey, so what problem are you going through? What's your issue? What do you want God to deliver you from? You must have a problem." And back then, I want to say I was a regular teenager, but what's a regular teenager? But I didn't have some kind of huge crisis going on. And then it's like they made me fish for problems. They made me really dig deep and find a problem. And apparently, the problem I had was that I liked boys. I mean, what teenager doesn't feel, hormones and feel a certain way at that age? It was fairly normal, So it's like, apparently that was the narrative they were going to give me. That was what I had to fight against on Fridays, this evil spirit that causes me to be promiscuous. I mean, I was even a virgin at that point. So it's like, but anywho, that's the narrative they gave me. So during those Friday services, it'll be like, the evil spirit that's causing her to be promiscuous, come out, show yourself. And it was so crazy, because it's like, people would respond to the prayer. You'll hear screaming and shouting, and it'll be a whole madness. But you kind of learn that behavior. They make you come every Friday. It's not like you're just meant to come one and then that's it. You have to come every single Friday. So you're learning kind of how to respond to the prayer. And with all of this, oh, what problem are you facing? Okay, so God's going to deliver you. You kind of think that you have to kind of play their game in order to be delivered. So when a pastor or an assistant or whoever comes to pray for you, and you know that you have that problem that they're like whispering in your ear, you know that you kind of have to respond to the prayer. So they often push your head back. So you start to kind of sway. And then when you start to kind of like move back, it's like, oh, then they double down on the prayer. Oh, yes, I know you're there, demon. Show yourself, show yourself. And the more you kind of go along with the program, the more attention you get. And then it becomes mass hysteria. On Surviving Universal UK, I'm often asked by survivors, like, how does that even happen? Like, how does that whole Friday madness happen? And those of you who have experienced a Friday service in the UCKG, wherever you may be, please share your experiences below so that others know that they're not alone, because it is a madness. So a lot of people say, what happens? Like, what's all of that about? Basically, it's mass hysteria. It's mass hysteria. They set up the stage, they make it extra eerie. They make sure there's no music playing, and it's needle drop quiet. And then they're coming with the prayers, in the name of Jesus, the evil spirit that's in this. Like, it's just, it becomes mass hysteria. It's like a frenzy. And people feel like they have to purge themselves of these problems. And the only how you can purge yourself is to go along with these strong prayers. So over time, you start to go along with it. You start to sway back and forth. And then it gets to a point where in the UCKG, they do this thing where they interview the demon. And the whole idea is that you have to basically confess your problem or your sin in the form of that demon that's causing it. So often you'll see people and they're like, oh, I'm the demon that's causing her immigration problems. She's never going to get her stay. This wasn't me, but this is something we see all the time. And, the pastor, interviews this demon. Oh, but demon, how did you get into her life? Oh, from her sister. You just kind of make up stuff on the pot and on the spot, and you kind of just have to go along with it. And it was an absolute madness. It was an absolute madness. And then it happens to you, and you're groomed and you're kind of caught up in this frenzy, this mass hysteria. You feel like that's the only how you can fight against this problem that is in your life. You have to kind of go along with it. So there were a lot of times where I was the person manifesting with demons on the stage. And looking back, it's like I put on the voice, I'm the demon that's causing her to be promiscuous. But looking back, it's like I was a virgin back then. Like, I was actually a good girl. I was running with the narrative that they created for me. It wasn't even real. Like the things I was talking about, this demon that they were into, it wasn't even real, but they were putting a lot of emphasis on it. They would put the microphone to your mouth and speak, demon, what are you causing? And you had to basically like waffle. It was crazy, but that was my life. And, you know, it must have took a few months, and Rachel went from just being a regular girl to being this conservative, hyper conservative Christian. Within months I changed. Changed the way that I lived. I dressed differently, I spoke differently. Everything about me was different. And every single day after school, I was in the church. I was required to be in the church for something, whether it's stamping and folding newspapers, cleaning the church, preparing for a youth group meeting. Like, I was required to be in the church every single day after school without fail, without fail. And it was crazy because it happened so fast and so subtly, you know? A lot of people ask me when I share my story, and they say, "Why didn't your parents do anything? Like, where were the adults in your life?" And what a lot of people don't understand is that I'm talking about a registered charity, a youth group, an organization that looks legit. Like, they look fully legit. And because they always set up their branches in the hood, to parents, it's like, well, this is surely the lesser of two evils. She's going church. Yeah, it's a bit excessive. Yeah, she keeps on asking me for money to give offering, but at least they're not in a gang. And that's how these organizations basically deceive parents to groom the kids. Thank you for starting the journey of hearing my story, the story that started Surviving Universal UK. Subscribe and comment your experiences below. And as always, if you're affected by any of the themes in this video, Surviving Universal UK is here to support you. You can either email info@survivinguniversaluk.org or send us a DM. I am here to support you. Please subscribe and comment if you want to hear part 2, because that's just the very beginning. Things get crazy.